I stepped off the cargo plane at Dover Air Force Base on a crisp October morning, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and 18 months of combat deployment finally behind me. The Delaware air felt impossibly clean after breathing the dust of Kandahar province for so long. This was supposed to be my moment of triumph, coming home alive, decorated, and about to claim the $890,000 inheritance my grandmother had left me before I deployed. But as I powered on my phone for the first time in 3 days of travel, what I saw in my bank account notifications made my hands shake so violently that I dropped my phone on the tarmac, watching the screen crack like my entire world was about to. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The numbers glowing back at me weren't just wrong. They were impossible. My inheritance account, the one that should have been growing with interest while I was dodging IEDs and mortar fire, showed a balance of $47.83. $47.83. Not $890,000. Not even close. My sister Autumn had been managing my finances while I was deployed. Sweet, reliable Autumn, who had promised to guard my grandmother's gift with her life. Autumn, who had sent me care packages filled with homemade cookies and letters about how proud she was of my service. Autumn, who had sobbed when I left for Afghanistan, begging me to come home safe because she, quote, couldn't bear to lose another family member. Standing there in my desert combat uniform, still smelling like gunpowder and sand, I stared at my phone screen trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There had to be a mistake. Banks make errors all the time. Maybe it was a system glitch, or maybe the money had been moved to a different account for security reasons. Maybe Autumn had invested it somewhere safe and just forgot to tell me. But deep in my gut, in that same place that had kept me alive during firefights and convoy runs, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. The inheritance wasn't just money to me. It was everything. It was my grandmother Elena's life savings, accumulated over decades of working as a seamstress in our small hometown of Millbrook Falls, Vermont. She had scrimped and saved every penny, living in the same tiny apartment above her shop for 40 years, all so she could leave something meaningful to her granddaughters. She'd split her entire estate between Autumn and me, $890,000 each, with explicit instructions that the money was to help us build the lives she never got to have. Grandma Elena had raised us after our parents died in a car accident when I was 12, and Autumn was 15. She was the only mother we'd known for most of our lives, working herself to exhaustion to keep us fed, clothed, and loved. When she passed away suddenly from a heart attack just 2 weeks before my deployment, I was devastated, but I was also grateful. Grateful that she'd lived long enough to see me become a soldier. Grateful that she'd left us something substantial. Grateful that I'd have a foundation to build on when I came home from war. I had plans for that money. Real plans. I was going to use it to buy a small house near the base, maybe start the security consulting business I'd been dreaming about. I was going to invest some of it, save some of it, and use part of it to honor Grandma Elena's memory by doing something meaningful. She'd always talked about how she wished she could have gone to college, how different her life might have been if she'd had opportunities. I wanted to set up a scholarship in her name, something that would help other young women from small towns chase bigger dreams. More than that, the money represented security. After 18 months of living in constant danger, of watching friends get injured or killed, of carrying the weight of combat on my shoulders, I was looking forward to having something stable to come home to. Something that would let me transition back to civilian life without the financial stress that breaks so many veterans. I had seen too many good soldiers come home only to struggle with jobs and housing and debt. The inheritance was supposed to be my safety net, my peace of mind. Now, standing in the crisp October air with my phone showing an impossible balance, I felt more terrified than I'd ever felt in Afghanistan. In combat, at least you can see your enemy, at least you know who's shooting at you. This was different. This was the sickening realization that the person I trusted most in the world might have betrayed me while I was risking my life for my country. I tried calling Autumn immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Her bright, cheerful voice chirped back at me. "Hi, you've reached Autumn Reeves. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave me a message and I'll get back to you soon." The same voicemail I'd heard dozens of times when calling from overseas, always followed by her calling me back within hours, eager to hear my voice and know I was safe. This time felt different. This time, the silence on the other end felt deliberate. As I stood there with military families reuniting around me, with soldiers being welcomed home by crying spouses and excited children, I realized that my homecoming was going to be nothing like I'd imagined. I wasn't coming home to security and new beginnings. I was coming home to what felt like the biggest betrayal of my life, Dafioyu. And I had no idea that this was just the beginning. I had no idea how deep Autumn's deception went, how long she'd been planning this, or how many lies I was about to uncover. All I knew was that nearly $1 million of my future had vanished while I was serving my country, and the only person with access to it was the sister I'd trusted with my life. What happened next would test everything I'd learned about survival, strategy, and warfare, except this time the enemy was family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Let me take you back to 18 months earlier, to the life I thought I was protecting while I was overseas. Before I deployed to Afghanistan, everything in my world felt solid, secure, and perfectly planned. I was Staff Sergeant Riley Parker, 26 years old, stationed at Fort Braxton in North Carolina. I'd just been selected for a specialized reconnaissance unit, the kind of assignment that could make or break a military career. The deployment was dangerous, sure, but it was also my chance to prove myself as a leader and earn the kind of experience that would set me up for life after the service. Back then, Millbrook Falls felt like a Norman Rockwell painting whenever I came home on leave. Population 8,400. Nestled in the Green Mountains of Vermont, where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest scandal was usually about who forgot to shovel their sidewalk after a snowstorm. Main Street was lined with maple trees that exploded into brilliant oranges and reds every fall, and the air always smelled like wood smoke and possibility. Grandma Elena's seamstress shop, Stitches and Stories, sat right in the heart of downtown, with its cheerful yellow awning and window displays that changed with the seasons. She'd run that shop for nearly 4 decades, building a clientele of loyal customers who came as much for her wisdom and warm smile as they did for alterations and custom dresses. The apartment above the shop was tiny but cozy, filled with antique sewing machines, bolts of fabric in every color imaginable, and the gentle hum of creativity that had been my lullaby growing up. Elena Parker wasn't just my grandmother, she was my hero. After our parents died in that horrific car accident on Interstate 89, she stepped up without hesitation. She was 58 years old, had never raised teenagers, and suddenly found herself guardian to 2 traumatized girls. But she never once made us feel like a burden. Instead, she made us feel chosen, special, like we were exactly what her life had been missing. "Every thread has a purpose in the tapestry," she used to say while working at her sewing machine. "Even the broken ones can be rewoven into something beautiful." She taught us that resilience wasn't just about surviving hardship. It was about finding ways to transform pain into strength, loss into purpose. Autumn and I had always been close, but after moving in with Grandma Elena, we became inseparable. Autumn was 3 years older, with strawberry blonde curls and the kind of infectious laugh that could light up a room. She was the artistic one, painting, writing poetry, always dreaming up creative projects. I was the practical one, organized, determined, already talking about military service, while other kids played with dolls. But we balanced each other perfectly. Autumn would paint elaborate murals on our bedroom walls, and I'd help her organize her art supplies with military precision. She'd write stories about magical kingdoms, and I'd create detailed battle strategies for her fictional armies. We were 2 halves of the same whole, shaped by loss but strengthened by the love of an extraordinary woman who refused to let tragedy define us. When I decided to join the Army at 18, Autumn was my biggest supporter. She helped me study for the ASVAB, drove me to my recruitment appointments, and cried proud tears when I graduated from basic training. "You're going to change the world, Riley," she'd tell me whenever I doubted myself. "You're going to make Grandma Elena so proud." And I was proud. By the time deployment orders came through, I'd built exactly the life I'd always wanted. I'd earned my sergeant stripes ahead of schedule, saved nearly $40,000 in my personal accounts, and had concrete plans for my future. The military had given me structure, purpose, and the confidence to dream big. The inheritance felt like the final piece of a perfect puzzle. When Grandma Elena passed away that spring, suddenly, peacefully, in her sleep, she left each of us $890,000. It was stunning. We'd known she was frugal, but we had no idea she'd been this financially savvy. Apparently, she'd been investing small amounts for decades, buying modest stocks and letting compound interest work its magic. Every dollar she didn't spend on herself, she saved for us. "I want my girls to have choices I never had," her will stated. "I want them to build lives filled with purpose and joy, not just survival." At the reading of the will, Autumn and I sat in lawyer Theodore Blackstone's office in Burlington, holding hands and crying. Not just from grief, but from overwhelming gratitude. This wasn't just money, it was freedom. It was the chance to honor everything Grandma Elena had taught us about resilience and possibility. We made plans together that day. Autumn was going to use her inheritance to finally open the art studio she'd dreamed about since childhood. She'd found the perfect space in downtown Millbrook Falls, a renovated warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough room for painting classes and community workshops. I was going to buy a house near Fort Braxton when I returned from deployment, maybe start the security consulting firm I'd been researching. We talked about pooling some of our money to turn Grandma Elena's shop into a memorial space, part art gallery for Autumn's work, part community center, part shrine to the woman who'd saved us both. Everything felt aligned. I had 18 months to serve my country, protect my fellow soldiers, and come home to a future that honored both my service and my grandmother's legacy. Autumn would manage both of our finances while I was overseas. She'd always been better with paperwork and details than I was, and I trusted her completely. "Don't worry about anything back home," she promised the night before I deployed. "I'll guard this money like it's my own life. When you come back, everything will be exactly as you left it, just waiting for you to build something amazing." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Autumn, my sister, my best friend, the person who'd held my hand through our parents' funeral and cheered the loudest at my military ceremonies. This was the girl who'd painted our childhood bedroom to look like a fairy tale castle and who still sent me care packages filled with homemade cookies shaped like hearts. Standing at the airport, watching my plane prepare for departure, I felt invincible. I had a mission to complete, a family to protect, money to come home to, and dreams to build. I was 26 years old, with the whole world ahead of me, serving my country while my inheritance grew safely in accounts managed by the person I trusted most. I should have known that perfect was too good to last. The people who mattered most to me during those 18 months overseas weren't just family. They were the lifelines that kept me grounded when everything around me was chaos and danger. Each of them played a crucial role in helping me believe that I had something worth fighting for, something worth coming home to. Autumn had always been more than just my sister. After our parents died, she became my anchor, my closest confidant, and the person who knew me better than I knew myself. During my deployment, she transformed into something even more precious, my connection to home, my guardian angel, and my most trusted ally. Her letters arrived like clockwork every 2 weeks, thick envelopes filled with photographs, newspaper clippings from the Millbrook Falls Gazette, and pages of her distinctive handwriting that curved and looped like artwork. She'd tell me about the changing seasons back home, about Mrs. Henderson's new puppy that kept escaping into the cemetery, about the controversy over whether to replace the old gazebo in the town square. These weren't just updates. They were lifelines that reminded me there was still a normal world waiting for me beyond the sandstorms and gunfire. Riley Bear, she'd write, using the nickname she'd given me when I was 5 and obsessed with teddy bears. I miss your terrible morning hair and the way you organize your socks by color. The house feels too quiet without you practicing your drill commands in the backyard. But I'm so proud of what you're doing over there. Grandma Elena would be bursting with pride. She sent care packages that became legendary in my unit. Homemade chocolate chip cookies that somehow stayed soft despite traveling halfway around the world. Hand-knitted scarves in our unit colors, and practical items I actually needed. Good socks, protein bars, the specific brand of lip balm that actually worked in the desert. But it was the personal touches that meant everything. A small framed photo of Grandma Elena's shop, packets of Vermont maple sugar candy, and always, always, a new painting she'd created just for me. Autumn had started painting seriously after I deployed, inspired by grief over Grandma Elena's death and her desire to create something beautiful from loss. Her paintings were extraordinary, landscapes of Vermont that captured not just how places looked, but how they felt. Rolling hills dotted with sugar maples, the covered bridge over Millbrook Creek during a winter snowfall, the view from our bedroom window on autumn mornings when fog rolled through the valley like smoke. "I'm documenting home for you," she explained in one letter, "so when you come back you'll remember why this place is magic." But more than the letters and packages, it was our video calls that kept me centered. Every Sunday at 2 p.m. my time, which was Saturday evening in Vermont, we'd connect through the base's communication center. Seeing her face on that grainy screen, watching her gestures and expressions, hearing her laugh, it reminded me that I was more than just a soldier. I was someone's sister, someone's family, someone with a real life waiting. During those calls, Autumn would give me detailed updates about our finances. She'd log into our shared accounts while we talked, showing me the balances growing with interest, explaining the conservative investments she'd made with portions of our inheritance. She'd screenshot statements and email them to me, walking through each transaction with the patience of a professional financial advisor. "The CD ladder is working beautifully," she'd explain, referring to the certificates of deposit she'd set up to mature at different intervals. "By the time you get home, we'll have earned an extra $40,000 in interest alone." And I moved some money into that high-yield savings account we talked about, the one that requires a minimum balance but gives us 3.2% APY. She'd also talk about her business plans, showing me blueprints for the art studio renovation, samples of paint colors she was considering, sketches of how she wanted to organize the space. She'd found a local contractor, Jake Morrison, whose family had lived in Millbrook Falls for generations, and they were planning to start the renovation 6 months before my return, so everything would be perfect when I got home. "I want you to walk into our new life the moment you step off that plane," she'd say, her eyes bright with excitement. "The studio will be open, your house down payment will be ready, and we'll finally be living the dreams Grandma Elena wanted for us." But Autumn wasn't my only anchor. There was also Captain Rebecca Torres, my commanding officer, and the closest thing to a mentor I'd ever had. Captain Torres was a 15-year veteran who'd come up through the ranks the hard way, earning respect through competence and integrity rather than politics or connections. She was tough as nails in the field but had a maternal instinct that kicked in whenever her soldiers needed guidance. "Parker," she'd tell me during our weekly check-ins, "you've got something special waiting for you back home. Don't you dare let this place change that. Some soldiers lose themselves over here, but you remember why you're fighting." She knew about my inheritance, about my plans, about Autumn, and our close relationship. During particularly difficult missions or when I'd seen too much violence, Captain Torres would pull me aside and remind me to focus on the future I was building. "Your sister sounds like good people," she'd say. "Family that takes care of family. That's worth fighting for. You get home safe to her, you hear me?" Then there was my battle buddy, Specialist Carmen Rodriguez from San Antonio, Texas. Carmen was 2 years younger than me but had an old soul and a wicked sense of humor that could diffuse even the most tense situations. We'd been paired together during advanced training and had requested to deploy together, the buddy system that keeps soldiers alive and sane in combat zones. Carmen knew everything about my life back home because we spent countless hours on patrol talking about our futures. She'd listen to me read Autumn's letters out loud, help me pick out items to send home in my own care packages, and offer advice about financial planning based on what her own family had taught her about money management. "Your sister sounds like she's got her head on straight," Carmen would say during long nights on guard duty. "Not everyone would handle that kind of money responsibly, especially not while dealing with grief. You're lucky to have someone you can trust completely." Carmen was planning to use her GI Bill benefits to become a nurse when she got home, and we'd spend hours talking about our parallel dreams. Me starting a security business, her healing people, both of us building something meaningful from our military experience. "We're going to make it home," she'd say whenever missions got particularly dangerous. "We're going to build those lives we've been planning. Your sister's going to have that art studio, you're going to have that house, and I'm going to save lives in scrubs instead of fatigues." Finally, there was Grandma Elena herself, not physically present, but spiritually woven through every day of my deployment. I carried her last letter in my breast pocket, the one she'd written just days before her heart attack. In it, she'd told me how proud she was of my service, how she knew I'd come home safely because I had too much purpose left to fulfill. "My brave Riley," the letter read, "you carry the strength of generations of women who survived impossible things. Come home to us whole and ready to build something beautiful. The money I'm leaving you isn't just inheritance. It's investment in the extraordinary life I know you'll create." I'd reread that letter during the worst moments, after firefights, during sandstorms, when fear threatened to overwhelm purpose. It reminded me that I wasn't just fighting for abstract concepts like freedom and democracy. I was fighting for the specific, tangible future that waited for me in Vermont. Autumn's art studio, my future home, the memorial to Grandma Elena's legacy that we'd build together. These people, Autumn, Captain Torres, Carmen, even Grandma Elena's memory, formed the inner circle that kept me grounded, motivated, and optimistic throughout 18 months of combat. They were my reason for surviving, my motivation for excellence, and my proof that I had a life worth protecting. I trusted them completely. I shared my fears, my hopes, my financial information, my deepest vulnerabilities. They were the foundation of everything I believed about loyalty, family, and friendship. Which is why what I discovered when I came home didn't just feel like theft. It felt like the complete destruction of my ability to trust anyone, ever again. There was something else that made those 18 months overseas bearable, something I hadn't shared with anyone except Autumn during our private video calls. Something that added an extra layer of excitement and anticipation to every day I served, every mission I completed, every step that brought me closer to coming home. I was secretly engaged. Lieutenant Colonel David Chen. No, that's not right. Let me call him Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Pierce. Nathan Pierce had been my training instructor 3 years earlier when I was working toward my sergeant promotion. He was career military, 8 years older than me, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from leading soldiers through real combat situations. He had dark hair that was always perfectly regulation cut, serious brown eyes that missed nothing, and hands that were equally comfortable holding a rifle or gently bandaging a wounded soldier. We'd started as mentor and student, then became colleagues, then slowly, carefully became something more. Military relationships are complicated, fraught with regulations, power dynamics, and the constant threat of deployment separation. But Nathan and I had built something genuine, something that transcended rank and protocol. He'd proposed 6 months before my deployment, during a weekend leave we'd spent hiking through the Blue Ridge Mountains near Fort Braxton. No elaborate setup, no photographer hiding in the bushes, just the two of us on a cliff overlooking the valley, talking about futures we wanted to build together. He'd pulled a simple solitaire ring from his backpack and said, "I know this complicates everything, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Will you marry me when you get back from Afghanistan?" I'd said yes before he finished the question, but we'd decided to keep the engagement secret until after my deployment. Military couples face enough scrutiny and potential complications without adding an international deployment to the mix. We didn't want whispers about favoritism, concerns about emotional distraction, or questions about whether my judgment might be compromised by personal relationships. So for 18 months, I carried that secret like a talisman. Nathan's ring hung on a chain around my neck, hidden beneath my body armor and uniforms. During video calls with Autumn, I'd show her the ring in private moments, planning our wedding from half a world away. "I've been looking at venues," Autumn would whisper during our calls, making sure no one else could hear. "There's this beautiful barn in Stowe that overlooks the mountains. Or we could do something small at the church where Grandma Elena's memorial service was held. Whatever you want, Riley Bear. This is going to be the most perfect wedding Vermont has ever seen." Nathan and I wrote letters constantly. Old-fashioned, handwritten letters that felt more intimate than emails or video calls. He'd tell me about the training exercises he was running, the young soldiers he was mentoring, the house he was quietly looking at for us to buy together when I returned. I'd tell him about missions I could discuss, about the soldiers in my unit, about how counting down days until our reunion was the only math that mattered anymore. 127 days until I can hold you again, one of his letters read. 127 days until we can start planning that life we've been dreaming about. I've been saving every penny of my deployment pay, just like you. Between your inheritance and our combined military savings, we're going to have the strongest foundation any couple could ask for. He knew about the inheritance, of course. I'd told him everything about Grandma Elena's unexpected gift, about the plans Autumn and I had made, about how the money would let us buy a house without a mortgage and start our married life with genuine financial security. Nathan had never been motivated by money. He was career military through and through, but he understood what that inheritance represented. Freedom, choices, the ability to serve our country without worrying about basic needs. "I'm proud of you for trusting your sister with something so important," he'd written in another letter. "Not everyone has family they can count on like that. It shows what kind of person you are and what kind of family raised you." During my deployment, Nathan had been stationed at Fort Gordon in Georgia, running advanced leadership training for officers preparing for their own overseas assignments. But he'd put in for a transfer to Fort Braxton, my home base, so we could be stationed together when I returned. Military couples often spend years separated by assignments, but Nathan had used his seniority and spotless record to arrange our reunion. "Everything's falling into place," he'd told me during one of our rare phone calls. "The transfer came through. I'll be at Braxton 2 months before you get back, which gives me time to find us that house, and maybe even put an offer down if you approve it remotely. We're going to have our whole life waiting for you when you step off that plane." But the engagement wasn't the only secret adding weight to my homecoming. There was also the Bronze Star medal I'd earned during a particularly dangerous rescue mission in the mountains outside Kabul. 3 soldiers from another unit had been trapped after their vehicle hit an IED, and my squad had volunteered for the extraction under heavy fire. I'd led the rescue team, coordinated with air support, and helped carry 2 wounded soldiers to safety, while taking sniper fire from multiple positions. The medal was supposed to be presented in a ceremony at Fort Braxton after my return, a surprise that Captain Torres had helped coordinate. Only a handful of people knew about it. Captain Torres, Nathan, and Autumn, who'd been contacted by the base to help plan the ceremony. "You're coming home a hero," Autumn had told me during our last video call before I left Afghanistan. "Not just because of the medal, but because of who you've become over there. Nathan is going to be so proud when he sees you walk across that stage. And I'm going to be in the front row, crying happy tears and probably embarrassing you with how loud I cheer." Everything was converging into what should have been the most perfect homecoming any soldier could imagine. I was returning with honor, with decorations, with an inheritance that would secure my future, with a fiancé waiting to marry me, and with a sister who'd protected everything I cared about while I was away. I'd spent months planning the moment I'd reveal my engagement to our extended family and friends. Nathan and I had decided to announce it at the welcome home party Autumn was organizing, a surprise celebration she'd been planning for weeks. She'd invited everyone who mattered: old friends from Millbrook Falls, fellow soldiers from my unit, neighbors who'd known our family for years, even some of Grandma Elena's longtime customers who'd watched me grow up. "I want your homecoming to be legendary," Autumn had said. "You've sacrificed so much, served so bravely. When you walk into that party and announce your engagement, when people see how perfectly your life is coming together, it's going to be like something out of a movie." She'd even coordinated with Nathan to make sure he could get leave for the party. The plan was for him to drive up from Fort Braxton and surprise me there, to get down on one knee in front of everyone and officially propose, even though we'd already been engaged for 2 years. It would be our public moment, our chance to share our joy with the people who'd supported us through the deployment separation. I had detailed lists in my personal journals: wedding venues to visit with Autumn, houses to look at with Nathan, business plans to develop for my security consulting firm, investment strategies for growing the inheritance even further. I'd sketched out timelines for the next 5 years, budgets for the wedding and house purchase, even preliminary ideas for the scholarship fund I wanted to establish in Grandma Elena's memory. Every piece of my future was mapped out, coordinated, planned down to the smallest detail. I was returning to a life that felt almost too good to be true: love, family, financial security, career success, and the deep satisfaction of having served my country with honor. Standing on that tarmac at Dover Air Force Base, staring at my phone screen showing $47.83, where nearly $1 million should have been, I felt like I was watching my entire future collapse in real time. This wasn't just about money disappearing. This was about the fundamental trust that made all my other dreams possible. If Autumn had betrayed me, then everything else I believed about coming home, about family, about the foundation of my new life, might be built on lies too. The final weeks before my return had felt like watching all the stars align in perfect formation. Every phone call, every email, every carefully coordinated detail seemed to confirm that I was coming home to the most beautiful life any person could imagine. It wasn't just hope anymore. It was certainty, backed by months of meticulous planning and excited anticipation from everyone I loved. Nathan had found our dream house 3 weeks before my scheduled return. During our video call, he'd walked me through it room by room, using his phone camera, his excitement infectious, even through the grainy military internet connection. It was a craftsman-style home on Maple Ridge Drive, just 20 minutes from Fort Braxton, with 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a backyard that backed up to protected forest land. "Look at this kitchen, Riley," he'd said, panning the camera slowly across granite countertops and custom cabinets. "It's got that huge island you've always talked about wanting. And check this out." He'd walked to the back window, showing me the view of rolling hills and maple trees that would turn brilliant orange every fall, just like the ones back home in Vermont. The house was listed at $340,000, which meant we could buy it outright with part of my inheritance and still have more than $500,000 left for investments and the business I wanted to start. Nathan had already gotten pre-approval from his bank, assuming we'd need a small mortgage, but I'd shocked him by explaining that we could pay cash. "Are you serious?" he'd asked, his eyes wide. "Riley, that changes everything. No mortgage means no debt. We could both leave the military tomorrow if we wanted to, and still be financially secure for years while we build our civilian careers." We'd made an offer that same day, $335,000, with a closing date set for 2 weeks after my return. The sellers had accepted immediately, charmed by the story of a deployed soldier coming home to start her married life. Even the realtor had gotten emotional, offering to coordinate the closing around my homecoming schedule and Nathan's military duties. But the house was just the beginning of our perfect plan. Autumn had been working with a local contractor to renovate the warehouse space she'd found for her art studio, and the transformation was beyond anything we'd originally imagined. During our last video call, she'd given me a virtual tour that left me speechless. The space was enormous. 4,000 square feet of exposed brick walls, soaring ceilings with skylights, and polished concrete floors that gleamed like mirrors. She'd sectioned it into different areas: a main gallery space for exhibitions, private studios for working artists, a classroom area for workshops, and even a small coffee bar where people could gather and discuss art. "Riley, you're not going to believe what this is going to look like when it's finished," she'd said, practically bouncing with excitement as she moved her phone camera around the space. Jake Morrison and his crew have been incredible. They're installing the last of the lighting fixtures next week, and then we just need to move in the furniture and equipment. She'd already lined up her first 3 exhibitions: a retrospective of local artists' work honoring Grandma Elena's memory, a show featuring veterans' art therapy pieces, and a solo exhibition of her own paintings documenting Vermont landscapes. She'd even gotten coverage in the regional arts magazine, with a feature story scheduled to run the week after my homecoming. "The reporter wants to interview you too," Autumn had explained. "The angle is Sisters Building Dreams: How Military Service and Artistic Vision Create Community Impact." She wants to talk about how we're using our inheritance to honor Grandma Elena's legacy while building something meaningful for Millbrook Falls. The business plan for my security consulting firm had evolved into something far more ambitious than I'd originally imagined. During long nights on base, I'd researched the industry extensively, reaching out to other veteran-owned firms and developing relationships with potential clients. I'd discovered a huge demand for specialized security consulting in our region, everything from personal protection for executives to cybersecurity audits for small businesses. I'd already registered the business name, Guardian Point Security Solutions, and had begun the process of obtaining necessary licenses and certifications. Nathan had connections with several government contractors who were eager to work with veteran-owned businesses, and I'd lined up preliminary meetings with 3 potential major clients for the month after my return. The financial projections were stunning. With my military experience, specialized training, and the professional network I'd built, I could realistically expect to gross $200,000 in the first year, scaling up to $500,000 annually within 3 years. Combined with Nathan's military salary and the passive income from investing most of my inheritance, we'd be financially independent before we turned 35. "You're going to be running your own empire," Carmen had joked during one of our last patrols together. "From soldier to CEO in 6 months. I'm going to tell my nursing school classmates that I used to share a foxhole with a future millionaire businesswoman." But beyond the financial success, everything felt emotionally perfect too. My welcome home party had grown into something that sounded more like a small-town festival than a private celebration. Autumn had rented the community center in Millbrook Falls, hired a local band, and arranged for catering from 3 different restaurants, including Giuseppe's, the Italian place where Nathan and I had had our first official date. The guest list had expanded to over 100 people, my entire extended family, Nathan's parents driving up from North Carolina, soldiers from my current and previous units, half the town of Millbrook Falls, and even some of Grandma Elena's elderly customers who insisted on attending to, quote, "welcome home Elena's brave granddaughter." "I've got everything coordinated," Autumn had explained during our final planning call. "The band will play while people arrive and mingle. Then Captain Torres is going to present your Bronze Star. I've worked with the base to make it an official ceremony. After that, you and Nathan can make your engagement announcement, and then we'll have dinner and dancing until midnight." She'd even arranged for a photographer to document everything, explaining that she wanted me to have professional photos of the night your new life officially began. She'd ordered flowers that matched my favorite colors, planned a menu that included all my favorite foods, and created a slideshow of photos from my deployment that would play during dinner. Nathan had coordinated his leave perfectly, planning to arrive in Millbrook Falls the morning of the party so he could help with setup and have time to decompress from his drive. We'd have the entire next week together before we both had to report back to Fort Braxton. A week to look at our new house, plan our wedding, and start building the life we'd spent 2 years dreaming about through letters and video calls. Even the weather seemed to be cooperating. The forecast for my homecoming weekend was perfect. Sunny skies, crisp October temperatures, and the peak of fall foliage season in Vermont. The maple trees would be at their most brilliant, creating the perfect backdrop for what autumn kept calling the most beautiful homecoming celebration in Vermont history. I'd made lists of everything I wanted to do during those first few weeks home. Sleep in my childhood bed for one night before moving in with Nathan. Take Autumn to our favorite hiking trail behind the cemetery. Visit Grandma Elena's grave and tell her about everything that had happened while I was away. Drive through downtown Millbrook Falls and see how it had changed. Help Autumn finish setting up her art studio. Start shopping for wedding venues with my sister and future mother-in-law. The Bronze Star ceremony had special meaning too. Captain Torres had explained that the timing was intentional. Presenting the medal in my hometown, surrounded by family and friends, would make it more meaningful than a standard military ceremony. "You earned this medal protecting other soldiers," she'd said. "It's fitting that you receive it surrounded by the people you were fighting to come home to." Everything was synchronized, planned, and perfectly timed. My inheritance was secure and growing under Autumn's careful management. My fiancé had found us the perfect house and was coordinating our entire future together. My sister had built an art studio that would employ local artists and honor our grandmother's memory. My military service was ending on the highest possible note, with recognition for genuine heroism. I'd even written the speech I planned to give at the party, thanking everyone who'd supported me during the deployment and announcing my engagement to Nathan. I'd practiced it during quiet moments on base, imagining how it would feel to stand in front of everyone I loved and share the joy of everything coming together so perfectly. Standing at Dover Air Force Base with my phone showing $47.83, I realized that all those perfect plans, all that careful coordination, all those dreams built on the foundation of trust and family loyalty, had been constructed on what might be quicksand. But I still didn't know how deep the betrayal went. I still believed that maybe there was an explanation, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the sister I'd trusted with everything hadn't actually stolen nearly $1 million while I was risking my life halfway around the world. I was about to learn that the perfect life I'd spent 18 months planning was not just gone. It had never really existed at all. Standing there at Dover Air Force Base, staring at that impossible bank balance, my mind started racing backward through the past 6 months, connecting dots I'd been too trusting, or maybe too desperate, to see clearly at the time. The signs had been there. God, they'd been right in front of me, but I'd explained them away because I wanted so badly to believe that everything back home was as perfect as Autumn made it seem. It started with the video calls that became increasingly shorter and more rushed. For the first year of my deployment, Autumn and I would talk for an hour or more every Sunday, but around month 14, those calls began getting cut short. She'd always have excuses. A client emergency at the art studio, a contractor meeting that couldn't be rescheduled, fatigue from working late into the night on her paintings. "I'm so sorry, Riley Bear, but Jake Morrison is here with questions about the electrical work," she'd say, barely 5 minutes into our call. "Can we catch up more next week? I promise I'll have better news about the renovation timeline." Or, "The gallery owner from Burlington is here unexpectedly to see my portfolio. This could be huge for getting my work into her next show. You understand, right?" Military life is all about seizing opportunities when they come. At the time, I'd been proud of how busy and successful she was becoming. I'd told myself that her growing art career was exactly what Grandma Elena would have wanted. Autumn finally pursuing her dreams with the confidence that financial security brings. But looking back, those shortened calls had started right around the time she should have been showing me detailed financial statements. walking through investment strategies, explaining how she was growing our inheritance. Instead, she'd begun giving me increasingly vague updates about our money. Where she used to show me actual bank screens and walk through each transaction, she started offering quick summaries that sounded impressive but lacked specifics. "Everything's growing beautifully," she'd say with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The high-yield accounts are performing exactly as projected, and the CD ladder is going to mature perfectly for when you get home. I've moved some money around to take advantage of better interest rates, but don't worry about the details, you've got enough to think about over there." When I'd ask to see statements or account balances, she'd promise to email them later, then always follow up with apologies about technical difficulties. "My scanner isn't working properly and these bank websites are so confusing," she'd write. "I'll get Jake to help me figure out the technology stuff next week and send you everything then." Those promised emails never came. The care packages had changed too, in ways that should have raised immediate red flags. For the first year, Autumn's packages were thoughtful but modest. Homemade cookies, practical items, small personal touches that showed love without breaking the bank. But starting around month 15, the packages became extravagant in a way that didn't match her previously careful spending habits. Expensive organic skincare products that cost $60 per jar. High-end outdoor gear from brands I'd mentioned wanting, but never expected to own. Gourmet food items from specialty stores in Burlington. Artisanal chocolates, imported coffee, fancy beef jerky that probably cost more per pound than most people spend on dinner. "I wanted to spoil you a little," she'd explained when I'd commented on how generous the packages were becoming. "You're sacrificing so much over there, and besides, the art studio is doing better than expected. I can afford to treat my hero sister." But Autumn's art career was just getting started. She hadn't sold any major pieces yet, hadn't had any exhibitions, wasn't teaching classes or workshops. The studio wasn't even open to the public. Where was the money for these expensive gifts coming from? I'd pushed down my concerns because I wanted to believe in her success, and because questioning her generosity felt ungrateful. But soldiers develop instincts about inconsistencies, and something about Autumn's explanations never quite added up. The renovation costs for her art studio had also begun sounding suspiciously high. What started as a modest project, cleaning up a warehouse space, adding some lighting, installing basic utilities, had morphed into what sounded like a complete luxury renovation. Jake Morrison suggested upgrading the electrical system to handle professional lighting, she'd explained during one of our brief calls. And it turns out we need a new HVAC system to protect the artwork from humidity. Plus, I decided to install hardwood floors instead of leaving the concrete. It'll look so much more professional for client meetings. Each upgrade came with price tags that made me wince. $15,000 for electrical work, $22,000 for climate control, $35,000 for flooring and finishes. When I gently suggested that maybe she was overspending on the renovation, she'd gotten defensive in a way that was completely unlike her usual collaborative approach to major decisions. "Riley, I know what I'm doing," she'd snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "I'm sorry, I'm just stressed about getting everything perfect before you come home. But trust me, this investment in quality will pay off for decades. Grandma Elena always said you should do things right the first time." The mention of Grandma Elena had shut down my questions, just as Autumn probably knew it would. But a $40,000 contingency fund for a small art studio renovation seemed excessive, especially when we'd originally budgeted the entire project at $20,000. Then there were the social media posts that didn't quite match her financial claims. Autumn had always been active on Instagram and Facebook, sharing her artwork and snippets of daily life in Vermont. But her posts from the past 6 months showed a lifestyle that seemed inconsistent with someone carefully managing 2 inheritance accounts while building a modest art business. Photos from expensive restaurants in Burlington and Montreal. Weekend trips to Boston and New York that she'd never mentioned during our calls. Designer clothes and accessories that I recognized from magazines but never thought Autumn could afford. A new car, a sleek Honda CR-V that she'd captioned, "Treating myself to reliable transportation for all my art supply runs." When I'd asked about the car during one of our video calls, she'd been evasive. "I needed something dependable for driving to galleries and art shows," she'd said. "I got a good deal through Jake Morrison's cousin who works at the dealership. Besides, it's practically a business expense." But a brand new CR-V cost $30,000, and Autumn's art career hadn't generated that kind of income yet. Even with a good deal and financing, the monthly payments should have been a significant stretch for someone living primarily off modest art sales and part-time freelance graphic design work. The most troubling sign had been her increasing reluctance to talk about Nathan. For the first year of my deployment, she'd been genuinely excited about my engagement, asking detailed questions about our wedding plans and offering to help coordinate everything. But recently, she'd started changing the subject whenever I brought up Nathan, our house hunting, or our future together. "You know, I'm happy for you," she'd say when I'd try to share updates about Nathan's house search. "But maybe we should focus on getting you home safely first before we get too deep into wedding planning. One step at a time, right?" It felt like she was trying to discourage me from thinking too far ahead, from getting too excited about the future Nathan and I were building. At the time, I'd assumed she was just being protective, maybe worried that planning too much would make it harder if something went wrong with my deployment. But looking back, her discomfort with my engagement planning had coincided perfectly with her vague financial updates and increasingly expensive lifestyle. She'd stopped wanting to talk about the future because she knew there might not be money to fund the future I was expecting. But Lokit. The final warning sign had been her last few letters. Autumn's handwriting had always been distinctive, flowing, artistic, confident, but her recent letters looked different. Her usually neat script was shakier, more hurried, with words crossed out and rewritten. The content had become repetitive and oddly formal, like she was struggling to fill pages without saying anything substantial. "Things here are good," she'd written in her most recent letter. "The weather has been nice, and the studio renovation continues on schedule. I hope you're staying safe and look forward to seeing you soon. Love, Autumn." It was the kind of letter you'd write to a distant relative, not your closest family member and best friend. Where were the detailed updates about townspeople we both knew? Where were the funny stories about Mrs. Henderson's escaped puppy or the latest town council drama? Where were the intimate sister conversations about fears and hopes and dreams? She'd been creating distance, I realize now, pulling back emotionally while maintaining the appearance of normal communication, probably because it's hard to write heartfelt letters to someone when you're systematically stealing their future. But I'd explained away every single red flag, because I needed to believe that someone back home was protecting what mattered most to me. I was living in a war zone, watching fellow soldiers get injured or killed, carrying the weight of life and death decisions every day. I couldn't afford to doubt the one thing that kept me grounded, my absolute faith that Autumn was safeguarding everything I was fighting to come home to. So I'd ignored my instincts. I'd rationalized the inconsistencies. I'd chosen trust over skepticism because the alternative was too terrifying to consider, while I was thousands of miles away and powerless to do anything about it. Now, standing at Dover Air Force Base with my entire future reduced to $47.83, I realized that my survival instincts had been screaming warnings at me for months. I just hadn't wanted to hear them. The 3-hour drive from Dover Air Force Base to Millbrook Falls should have been a celebration. My first taste of American highways, familiar landscapes, and the gradual transition from military base sterility to the rolling green hills of home. Instead, it became the longest, most agonizing journey of my life as I frantically tried to reach Autumn, while increasingly obvious signs of her deception mounted with every mile. I'd borrowed a phone charger from another soldier at Dover and spent the first hour of the drive calling Autumn's number obsessively. Every call went straight to voicemail. Not the normal voicemail delay that happens when someone's phone is busy. The immediate click to voicemail that means the phone is either turned off or deliberately screening calls. "Hi, you've reached Autumn Reeves. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave me a message and I'll get back to you soon. That cheerful, confident voice felt like mockery now. I left increasingly desperate messages, trying to keep my voice calm but hearing it crack with each attempt. Autumn, it's me. I'm home. There's something wrong with my bank account and I need you to call me immediately. Please. Then, Autumn, I know you're getting these messages. Something's happened to our inheritance money and I need an explanation. Call me back right now. Finally. Autumn, I'm driving home and I'm scared. The account shows almost nothing left. Please tell me there's a reasonable explanation for this. Please call me back. She never did. As I drove north through New Hampshire and into Vermont, I started making other calls that should have been routine check-ins, but instead became increasingly alarming fact-finding missions. I called the bank first, hoping against hope that the mobile app was showing incorrect information, that there was a system error or temporary hold that would explain the impossible balance. Ms. Parker, I show that you have joint account access with Autumn Reeves, the customer service representative confirmed after I'd provided all my security information. The current balance in your savings account is $47.83, and there have been extensive withdrawal activities over the past 4 months. Would you like me to email you recent statements? Yes, immediately, I managed to say, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. And can you tell me the total amount of withdrawals in the past 6 months? There was a pause, typing, then a sharp intake of breath from the representative. Ms. Parker, I'm showing total withdrawals of $847,230 between April and September of this year. Multiple cashier's checks, wire transfers, and cash withdrawals, all authorized with proper identification and account credentials. $847,230. Nearly my entire inheritance systematically drained while I was dodging bullets and IEDs in Afghanistan. Were these transactions conducted in person? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, ma'am. All withdrawals were made at our Burlington branch with proper identification and joint account holder authorization. Ms. Reeves provided appropriate documentation for all transactions. I hung up before I said something I'd regret and immediately called Nathan. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm with excitement. Riley, you're home. I was just packing to drive up to Vermont for the party tomorrow. How was the flight? Wait, you sound upset. What's wrong? I tried to explain coherently, but the words came out in a panicked rush. The bank account. The missing money. Autumn not answering her phone. The growing realization that everything we'd planned together might be built on lies. Nathan's voice changed completely as I talked, shifting from excitement to confusion to the kind of controlled anger I'd only heard from him during military briefings about serious threats. Riley, slow down. Tell me exactly what the bank said. I repeated the numbers, the timeline, the systematic nature of the withdrawals. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically hear him processing the implications. Okay, he said finally, his voice tight with restrained fury. We need to think strategically about this. First, you need to get to Millbrook Falls and confront Autumn directly. Second, we need to document everything and probably involve law enforcement. Third, he paused. Riley, our house closing is supposed to happen next week. If that money is really gone, the house, our perfect house with the wraparound porch and forest views, the house we were supposed to buy with cash, debt-free, the foundation of our new life together. Without the inheritance money, we couldn't afford it. We'd lose the deposit, lose the dream, lose the symbol of everything we'd been working toward. Nathan, I'm so sorry, I whispered, tears finally starting to flow. I trusted her. I trusted her with everything. This isn't your fault, he said firmly. You did what any reasonable person would do. You trusted family. But Riley, we need to know how bad this is. Can you think of any other accounts she had access to? Any other assets? That's when I remembered the investment accounts. Grandma Elena's inheritance had been split between checking accounts for immediate access and investment accounts for long-term growth. In my panic about the missing money, I'd forgotten to check whether Autumn had somehow accessed those as well. I pulled over at a rest stop and frantically logged into my investment account app. The page loaded slowly, and for a moment I held my breath, hoping that maybe Autumn's theft had been limited to the liquid savings accounts. The investment balance showed $0. Every stock, every bond, every carefully selected mutual fund that was supposed to fund my retirement and provide passive income for decades, gone. Liquidated systematically over the past 3 months, converted to cash, and then, presumably stolen just like everything else. I called the investment firm directly, not caring that I was probably violating some military communication protocol by conducting personal financial business during my official travel time. Ms. Parker, yes, I show that Ms. Reeves liquidated your entire portfolio in July and August, the advisor confirmed. She provided power of attorney documentation and explained that you needed the funds for an emergency real estate investment opportunity. The total liquidation value was $127,450 after fees and taxes. Power of attorney. Autumn had somehow obtained legal authorization to act on my behalf, then used it to steal everything Grandma Elena had left me. Nearly $1 million, accumulated over decades of our grandmother's sacrifice and careful saving, stolen by the person I'd trusted most in the world. But the financial theft was only part of what was becoming clear as I sat in that rest stop, staring at my phone and trying to process the magnitude of Autumn's betrayal. I started thinking about the art studio, the renovation, her expensive new lifestyle, and began to understand that she hadn't just stolen my money. She'd used it to build herself a completely different life while lying to me about every detail. I called Jake Morrison, the contractor who'd been working on Autumn's studio renovation. I'd heard enough about him during our video calls to know he was a local guy, and small-town contractors are usually listed in public directories. Jake Morrison Construction. A gravelly voice answered. Mr. Morrison, this is Riley Parker, Autumn Reeves' sister. I just got back from deployment and I'm trying to get an update on the studio renovation costs. Can you give me a rough total of what Autumn has paid you so far? Riley, welcome home. Your sisters told me so much about you. His voice was genuinely warm. She's been so excited about your homecoming. As for the renovation, let me see. We're looking at about $180,000 total. Autumn paid most of it up front in cash, which was amazing. Usually I have to chase clients for payments, but she just showed up with cashier's checks every few weeks. Really helped keep the project moving smoothly. $180,000 for a simple art studio renovation that was originally budgeted at $20,000. Autumn had used my inheritance money to build herself a luxury art facility while telling me it was a modest renovation funded by her non-existent art sales. Did she mention where the money was coming from? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She said she'd gotten an inheritance from your grandmother and wanted to invest it in something meaningful. Really admirable. Honoring family like that. She's got good values, that sister of yours. Honoring family by stealing from the granddaughter who was risking her life serving her country. I hung up and sat in my car, watching traffic flow past on Interstate 89, trying to absorb the scope of what Autumn had done. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a temporary borrowing that got out of hand. This was systematic, premeditated theft carried out over months with careful planning and legal documentation. She'd obtained power of attorney, liquidated investments, drained bank accounts, and used nearly $1 million of my money to fund her dream life while I was in combat. The welcome home party was tomorrow. Nathan was driving up from North Carolina. Over 100 people were expecting to celebrate my homecoming and hear about my bright future. The Bronze Star ceremony was planned. The engagement announcement was scheduled. But there was no future to celebrate, no house to buy, No business to start. No financial security to build a marriage on. No honor to Grandma Elena's memory. Just the devastating realization that the person I'd trusted most in the world had systematically destroyed everything I'd been fighting to come home to. As I pulled back onto the highway for the final hour of driving to Millbrook Falls, I realized I wasn't just going home to confront Autumn about theft. I was going home to discover who my sister really was, and whether anything about our relationship had ever been genuine. I pulled into Millbrook Falls just as the sun was setting behind the Green Mountains, casting long shadows across Main Street. The town looked exactly as I'd been dreaming about for 18 months. The same quaint storefronts, the same maple trees now blazing with October color, the same sense of peaceful, small-town perfection that had sustained me through firefights and sleepless nights in Afghanistan. But now it all felt like a movie set, a beautiful facade hiding something rotten underneath. Autumn's apartment was above what used to be Grandma Elena's seamstress shop, but as I drove past, I barely recognized the building. The familiar yellow awning had been replaced with sleek black canvas emblazoned with Autumn Reeves Gallery in elegant silver lettering. The windows that once displayed simple alterations and custom dresses now showcased expensive-looking modern art pieces with dramatic lighting that made them glow like jewels. I parked across the street and sat in my borrowed rental car, staring at what had once been the heart of our family's life in Millbrook Falls. Even from the outside, it was clear that this wasn't the modest art studio Autumn had described. This was a high-end gallery that probably cost more to renovate than most people's houses. The lights were on in the apartment upstairs, and I could see Autumn's silhouette moving around inside. She was home. She'd been ignoring my calls while she was literally 20 feet away from where I was sitting. I climbed the familiar stairs to her apartment, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe there was still an explanation. Maybe the money had been moved for legitimate reasons. Maybe I was about to walk into a surprise of some kind, and this was all an elaborate misunderstanding. I knocked on the door that had once been painted cheerful yellow but was now sophisticated charcoal gray. Through the frosted glass panels, I could see Autumn freeze in place, clearly visible but not moving toward the door. "Autumn, it's me. I know you're in there. We need to talk." Still no movement. I knocked again, harder this time. "Autumn, I'm not leaving until you explain what happened to my inheritance money. Open the door." Finally, I heard footsteps, the sound of multiple locks being undone, and then the door opened just wide enough for Autumn to peer out. When she saw me, her face went completely white, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Riley," she whispered, not opening the door any wider. "You're early. I thought you weren't getting home until tomorrow." She looked different. Her strawberry blonde curls had been professionally highlighted and styled. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, expensive-looking jeans, and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than a soldier's weekly pay. Even her makeup was more sophisticated, applied with the kind of skill that comes from professional training or expensive products. "Autumn, we need to talk about the bank accounts, right now." She glanced nervously over her shoulder, then stepped outside and quickly closed the door behind her. "Riley, you look exhausted. Maybe you should go get a hotel room and rest, and we can catch up tomorrow before the party." "I'm not going anywhere until you explain where my $890,000 went." The color drained completely from her face, and she couldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe there's been some kind of bank error." "Autumn, stop. I've already talked to the bank. I know about the withdrawals, the cashier's checks, the power of attorney. I know you took everything." For a moment, she looked like she might try to continue lying. But then something in her expression shifted, and I saw a flicker of the sister I thought I knew, scared, ashamed, but also defiant. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "I can explain everything, but not here, not like this." "Then where? When? Because I've been calling you all day and you've been ignoring me." I know, I needed time to figure out how to tell you." "Tell me what, exactly?" She looked around nervously, as if checking to see whether any neighbors were watching us. The paranoid behavior of someone who knows they've done something wrong. Riley, please. Can we do this tomorrow? I have everything planned for your homecoming party, and there's not going to be a party. I realized I was shouting and forced myself to lower my voice. Autumn, do you understand what you've done? I can't buy the house Nathan and I picked out. I can't start my business. I can't honor Grandma Elena's memory the way we planned. You've destroyed everything I was working toward. She flinched as if I'd hit her, but there was something else in her expression that I couldn't quite identify. Not just guilt or shame, but something that looked almost like relief? I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. It started small, just borrowing a little bit for the gallery renovation, and then things got complicated. Complicated how? Autumn, you stole nearly $1 million from me while I was in a war zone. How does that just get complicated? That's when I heard it. The sound of footsteps inside her apartment, moving around as if someone was trying to be quiet. My blood went cold. Who's in there with you? Nobody, she said too quickly. I'm alone. But I'd heard what I'd heard, and 18 months of combat had trained me to trust my senses about potential threats. Someone was definitely inside that apartment, someone who was trying to avoid being detected. Autumn, who is in your apartment? Riley, please, just go to a hotel tonight and we'll talk tomorrow. I pushed past her and opened the door before she could stop me. The apartment that I'd known since childhood, the space where Autumn and I had grown up after our parents died, had been completely transformed. Gone were Grandma Elena's antique furniture and cozy decorations. Instead, the space looked like something from a magazine. Modern furniture, expensive artwork, lighting fixtures that probably cost more than most people's cars. But what stopped me cold wasn't the expensive renovation. It was the man standing frozen in the middle of the living room, clearly caught in the act of trying to hide. Nathan. My fiancé Nathan was standing in my sister's apartment, wearing civilian clothes instead of his uniform, looking like he'd been living there for quite some time. Riley, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I can explain. The world tilted sideways. Nathan was supposed to be at Fort Braxton, packing for his drive to Vermont. Nathan was supposed to arrive tomorrow morning to help set up for my welcome home party. Nathan was supposed to be the one person I could count on when everything else in my life was falling apart. Instead, he was standing in my sister's apartment looking guilty and cornered, while Autumn hovered behind me like she wanted to run. How long? I asked, my voice strangely calm despite the hurricane building inside my chest. Neither of them answered. How long have you two been together? Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it, looking at Autumn as if asking for permission to speak. That small gesture, the way he deferred to her, the way they communicated without words, told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. 6 months, Autumn whispered finally. It started 6 months ago. 6 months. Right around the time my video calls with Autumn started getting shorter. Right around the time Nathan's letters started feeling different. Right around the time Autumn began draining my inheritance accounts. And my money? I asked, still in that same eerily calm voice that didn't feel like it belonged to me. We needed it, Nathan said, finding his voice for the first time. Autumn's gallery, this apartment, starting our life together. We needed capital to make it work. Our life together. Nathan and Autumn had been planning a life together using money stolen from me, while I was risking my life serving my country. The house we were supposed to buy? I asked. The wedding we were planning? Nathan had the decency to look ashamed. I was going to end things with you when you got back. We didn't want to do it while you were deployed. It seemed cruel. So instead you stole from me and let me plan a future that never existed. Riley, Autumn said, stepping forward with tears in her eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. You're my sister. But Nathan and I, what we have is real. And you were so far away and we weren't sure you were coming back. Stop talking. I'd heard enough. More than enough. I looked around the apartment that had been transformed with my money, at the sister who'd betrayed everything we'd meant to each other, at the fiancé who'd been planning to dump me after stealing my inheritance. And I realized that everything I'd believed about my life for the past 2 years had been a lie. The welcome home party they'd planned wasn't a celebration of my service and homecoming. It was going to be the setting for Nathan to publicly break up with me, probably making it look like the trauma of deployment had changed me, making me the problem instead of them. Standing there in that expensively renovated apartment, I understood that I wasn't just discovering theft. I was discovering that the two people I'd trusted most in the world had conspired to destroy my future while making me grateful for their support. The silence in that apartment stretched on forever, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Nathan and Autumn stood there like guilty children caught stealing cookies, except they'd stolen my entire future instead of something that could be replaced with a trip to the grocery store. 6 months, I repeated, letting the timeline sink in. So when you were sending me care packages with love notes, you were sleeping with my fiancé. When you were helping me plan my wedding, you were planning to steal my groom. When you were promising to protect my inheritance, you were using it to build a life with the man I thought I was going to marry. Autumn's tears were flowing freely now, but I felt nothing watching her cry. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her the way I had thousands of times throughout our lives. Just a cold, analytical clarity that must have been what shock felt like. I need to know everything, I said, my voice still unnaturally calm. All of it. How this started. How you got power of attorney. How long you've been planning this. I need to understand exactly how thoroughly you've both betrayed me. Nathan and Autumn exchanged another one of those looks, the kind of wordless communication that develops between people who've been intimate for months. It was like watching them speak a secret language that I wasn't allowed to understand. I'll tell her, Nathan said finally, sinking onto the expensive leather couch that had probably cost more than most soldiers make in a month. Riley, sit down, please. I'll stand. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now recognized as something he did when he was about to lie to someone. How many times had I seen him do that exact movement before telling me sweet lies about missing me, about counting down days until I came home? It started during your 4th month of deployment, he began. I was having a hard time with the separation, and I drove up to Vermont to visit Autumn. Just as friends, just to feel connected to you somehow. Bullshit, I said quietly. You drove 5 hours to Vermont to feel connected to me? There are phones, Nathan. There's email. You didn't drive to Vermont for me. He had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. I drove up because I was lonely, and I knew Autumn would understand what I was going through. What you were going through. I was the one getting shot at. I was the one sleeping in a foxhole. I was the one watching friends get blown up by IEDs. What exactly were you going through that was so difficult? You don't understand, Autumn interjected, moving to sit beside Nathan on the couch. The casual way she curled up next to him, the automatic intimacy of the gesture, hit me like a physical blow. Nathan was struggling with the deployment separation. He needed support. From my sister? He needed support from my sister? I was there, Autumn said defensively. I understood what he was feeling because I missed you too. We bonded over loving you and worrying about you. And that bonding led to what, exactly? Nathan picked up the story, his voice getting quieter with each word. The first few visits were innocent. We'd look at photos of you, talk about your letters, plan surprises for when you got home. But then you started fucking each other. The crude language made them both flinch, but I was past caring about politeness or delicate feelings. These people had destroyed my life while I was serving my country. They didn't deserve gentle language. It wasn't like that, Autumn said quickly. It wasn't casual or meaningless. We fell in love, Riley. We tried to fight it, but you fell in love. While I was in Afghanistan, fighting for my life, you two fell in love with each other. We didn't plan it, Nathan said. It just happened. And once it did, we didn't know how to tell you. You were in a war zone, dealing with life and death situations every day. How could we burden you with relationship drama when you needed to stay focused on survival? So instead you decided to wait until I came home, steal my inheritance money, and then dump me at my own welcome home party? No, Autumn stood up abruptly. That's not what we planned. We were going to tell you gently, privately. We were going to make sure you were settled and okay before we… Before you? What? Before you explained that you'd been stealing from me for months to fund your love nest? The power of attorney documents were sitting on Autumn's kitchen counter. I could see them from where I stood. Official legal papers that gave her complete access to my financial accounts. I walked over and picked them up, scanning the dates and signatures. April 15th, I read aloud. You got power of attorney on April 15th. Nathan, when did you two start sleeping together? Riley, please? When? March, he whispered. March. So you started your affair in March, got legal control of my money in April, and began stealing from me systematically while sending me love letters and care packages. Is that an accurate timeline? Neither of them answered, but they didn't need to. The documents told the whole story. Autumn had forged my signature, or maybe convinced me to sign something during one of our video calls by claiming it was for a different purpose. The power of attorney was comprehensive, giving her authority to access bank accounts, investment portfolios, even make real estate decisions on my behalf. How much of it is left? I asked, continuing to read through the papers. Because the bank said $47.83, but maybe you've got some of it stashed somewhere, planning to give it back once you figured out how to explain this. It's gone, Autumn whispered. All of it. Gone where? Nathan gestured around the apartment. The gallery renovation downstairs cost $180,000. This apartment renovation was another $75,000. We needed furniture, equipment for the gallery, a new car for Autumn since hers was breaking down. You bought a car with my money? It was for practical reasons, Autumn said quickly. I needed reliable transportation for gallery business, for driving to art shows and client meetings. What gallery business? What clients? Autumn, you haven't sold a single painting yet. You told me yourself that you were just getting started. She couldn't meet my eyes. I was building the foundation for future success, investment in infrastructure. You were living a fantasy lifestyle with stolen money. I looked around the apartment again, taking in details I'd missed in my initial shock. The kitchen had been completely gutted and rebuilt with high-end appliances. The bathroom had been turned into a spa-like retreat, with a soaking tub and marble countertops. The bedroom, I could see into it from where I stood, had clearly been furnished for 2 people. Where did you tell people the money came from? I asked. When Jake Morrison asked, when the bank requested documentation for large cash withdrawals, when anyone questioned how a struggling artist suddenly had hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend, what did you tell them? I told them it was my inheritance from Grandma Elena, Autumn said, which technically it was. No, technically it was half yours and half mine, and you stole my half. I always planned to pay you back, she said desperately. Once the gallery started generating income, once I began selling paintings and teaching classes, I was going to replace everything I'd used. With what money? Autumn, you've never sold a painting for more than $100. You think you were going to generate $900,000 selling art in Millbrook Falls, Vermont? The math was so absurdly impossible that I almost laughed. Almost. If I'd started laughing, I probably wouldn't have been able to stop, and I wasn't ready to have a complete breakdown in front of the 2 people who'd orchestrated my destruction. We had business plans, Nathan said. The gallery space downstairs can host events, workshops, private parties. Autumn's artwork is extraordinary. She just needed the right platform to showcase it. We were building something sustainable. We, I repeated. You were building something. With my money. While I was in Afghanistan. Riley, I know how this looks, Nathan continued. But we weren't trying to hurt you. We were trying to build something beautiful, something that would eventually benefit everyone. Benefit everyone? How was stealing my inheritance going to benefit me? You would have been part of it, Autumn said. When you came home, we were going to offer you a partnership in the gallery. You could have been our business manager, handled the financial side while I focused on the artistic vision. A partnership. In a business you built with my stolen money. How generous of you. I walked to the window and looked down at Main Street, trying to process the magnitude of their delusion. They'd convinced themselves that stealing from me was actually a favor, that destroying my financial future was somehow an investment in our collective success. But there was something else bothering me. Something beyond even the theft and betrayal. The timeline was too convenient, too coordinated. Nathan and Autumn, falling in love, getting power of attorney, beginning systematic theft. It had all happened too smoothly to be accidental. How long have you two known each other? I asked, turning back to face them. What do you mean? Autumn said. Nathan's your fiancé. We met when you introduced us. When did I introduce you? 2 years ago, when Nathan first came to visit Millbrook Falls with you. But that wasn't right. I'd never brought Nathan to Vermont during our early relationship. Our first visit to my hometown together had been planned for after my deployment, as part of our engagement announcement tour. Nathan, I said slowly, when was the first time you came to Millbrook Falls? He looked trapped, glancing at Autumn as if asking for help with his lie. And in that moment, I realized that the betrayal went even deeper than I'd thought. Nathan's silence stretched on long enough to confirm what I was beginning to suspect, that even the basic timeline of our relationship, everything I thought I knew about how we'd met and fallen in love, had been built on lies. The trapped expression on his face, the way he kept looking to Autumn for guidance, suggested that their connection went back much further than they'd admitted. Nathan, I said again, my voice deadly quiet. When was the first time you came to Millbrook Falls? Riley, it doesn't matter when. It matters to me. When? Autumn stood up from the couch, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. Riley, please don't do this. You're hurting yourself by asking these questions. I'm hurting myself. I'm hurting myself by trying to understand how thoroughly you've both lied to me. 3 years ago, Nathan said finally, his voice barely audible. I came to Millbrook Falls 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Before Nathan and I had even started dating. Before I'd mentioned Autumn to him or told him about my hometown. Before any of the story I'd believed about our relationship made sense. Why? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer was going to destroy whatever small pieces of my life were still intact. I was visiting a friend, he said, not meeting my eyes. What friend? Another long pause. Another guilty exchange of glances between Nathan and Autumn. Me? Autumn whispered. He was visiting me. The room started spinning slightly, and I had to grip the back of a chair to keep myself steady. You two knew each other before Nathan and I met. Riley, sit down, Autumn said, moving toward me with genuine concern in her eyes. You look pale. Don't touch me. I backed away from her. Don't you dare pretend to be concerned about me now. Tell me the truth, all of it. Nathan stood up, running his hands through his hair again. That lying gesture that I now realized had probably preceded every major deception in our relationship. I met Autumn 3 years ago when I was on leave, he began. I was driving through Vermont, stopped in Millbrook Falls for lunch, and ended up at the coffee shop next to your grandmother's shop. Autumn was there, working on some paintings at one of the corner tables. And you just struck up a conversation? She was beautiful, he said simply. And talented. I'd never met anyone like her. I looked at Autumn, who was crying silently but making no effort to deny Nathan's story. So what happened 3 years ago? I asked. Did you date? Did you sleep together? Did you fall in love and then what? Nathan just disappeared. I got transferred to Fort Braxton before anything serious could develop, Nathan said. We stayed in touch for a while, but long-distance relationships are hard, and we both moved on. You moved on to me. No, it wasn't like that. When I met you at Fort Braxton, I wasn't thinking about Autumn. You are, an incredible woman. I genuinely fell for you. But you never mentioned that you'd met my sister before. How could I? Hey Riley, funny coincidence, I used to have a thing with your sister? It would have made everything weird. So instead, you pretended it was a coincidence when I introduced you two over video chat. It seemed easier than explaining the history. I thought back to that video call, maybe 8 months into Nathan's and my relationship, when I'd first introduced him to Autumn during one of our regular Sunday conversations. I remembered how easily they'd seemed to connect, how naturally they'd talk to each other. I'd been delighted that my boyfriend and my sister got along so well. How long have you two been in contact? I asked. The whole time, Autumn admitted. Even while you and Nathan were dating, we stayed friends. Just friends, she added quickly. We'd text occasionally, talk about you, share updates about your life and career. You were talking about me, behind my back. The two of you were having private conversations about me, while I thought I was in separate relationships with each of you. It wasn't malicious, Nathan said. We both cared about you. Autumn would tell me things about your childhood that helped me understand you better. I'd tell her about your military achievements that you were too modest to share yourself. And when did just friends become something else? When you deployed, Autumn said. Nathan was struggling with the separation, and I was missing you, and we started talking more frequently. Supporting each other right into bed. It wasn't supposed to happen, Nathan said, but we were both grieving your absence in our own ways, and we understood each other's pain better than anyone else could. My absence? You were grieving my absence while I was in Afghanistan getting shot at. I walked to the window again, trying to process the layers of deception that kept revealing themselves. Nathan and Autumn had known each other for 3 years. They'd maintained a secret friendship throughout my relationship with Nathan. They'd bonded over my deployment and used their shared grief over my absence as justification for betraying me. But there was still something about their story that didn't add up. The power of attorney, I said, turning back to face them. Autumn, you got power of attorney in April, just 1 month after you two started sleeping together. That's not a coincidence. You planned the theft. It wasn't planned like that, Autumn protested. I got power of attorney because you asked me to handle your finances while you were deployed. You wanted someone you trusted to manage the inheritance accounts. But you didn't tell me you were sleeping with Nathan when you got that authority. How could I? You were in a war zone. You needed to focus on survival, not relationship drama back home. So instead, you decided to steal from me to fund your new relationship. We didn't think of it as stealing, Nathan said. We thought of it as investing in our future, all of our futures. The gallery was going to be successful, we were going to pay you back with interest, and eventually you'd understand that we'd used your money to build something amazing. Our futures? Nathan, you were planning to break up with me. How was any of this supposed to benefit my future? We were going to offer you a partnership in the gallery business, Autumn said. You could have been part of what we were building. After you broke up with me and stole my inheritance, after we explained the situation and helped you understand that what Nathan and I have together is real and meaningful, I stared at her, trying to comprehend the level of delusion required to believe that story. They'd convinced themselves that stealing from me was actually a favor, that destroying my financial future was an investment in my happiness, that I'd be grateful to discover my fiancé and sister were in love with each other. What about the welcome home party? I asked. Was that going to be where you announced your relationship? and offered me a junior partnership in the business you built with my stolen money. We hadn't decided on the timing, Nathan admitted. We were going to see how you seemed when you got home, how ready you were to hear difficult news. Difficult news. That's what you call this. I looked around the apartment one more time, taking in all the expensive renovations, the high-end furniture, the artwork on the walls that had probably cost more than most people's cars. Everything beautiful and sophisticated and completely unaffordable for a struggling artist and a military officer, unless they had access to someone else's inheritance. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady for the first time since I'd walked into this nightmare. "I'm leaving now. I'm going to a hotel, and tomorrow I'm going to figure out how to report this theft and get back whatever money might be recoverable. I'm going to contact a lawyer and see what legal options I have." "Riley, please," Autumn said, moving toward me. "We can work this out as a family. We don't need lawyers and police reports." "Family?" I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. "Autumn, you're not my family anymore. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't conspire to destroy each other's futures. You're a thief who happens to share my DNA." "That's not fair," she said, tears flowing freely now. "I love you. I've always loved you. Everything I did was because I was trying to build something beautiful. You built something beautiful with my stolen money while I was risking my life for my country. You let me plan a future that never existed while you were systematically destroying any chance I had of actually building that future." I turned to Nathan, who was sitting on the couch looking like he wanted to disappear. "And you," I said. "You let me write you love letters for 18 months while you were sleeping with my sister. You let me plan our wedding while you were planning to dump me. You encouraged me to trust Autumn with my finances while you knew she was stealing from me. Riley, I never wanted to hurt you. You never wanted to get caught." "There's a difference." I walked to the door, then turned back one final time. "The welcome home party is canceled. If anyone asks why, tell them the truth, that the guest of honor discovered her sister and fiancé had stolen her inheritance and used it to fund their affair while she was deployed." "Riley, wait," Autumn called out. "Please don't leave like this. We can fix this. We can make this right." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "Autumn, there is no fixing this. You didn't just steal my money. You stole my ability to trust anyone, ever again. You stole my faith in family, my belief in love, my confidence in my own judgment. That's not something you can pay back with interest." And with that, I walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the sister I'd loved unconditionally and the man I'd planned to marry, both of them sitting in their expensive love nest built with the inheritance my grandmother had saved for 40 years to give me. But as I walked down those stairs, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't broken. I was furious, devastated, and betrayed beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible. But I wasn't broken. Man, I was ready to fight back. I drove to the Millbrook Falls Inn, the only hotel in town, and checked into a room that cost more per night than I used to spend on groceries in a week. But I paid with my credit card without hesitation, because I needed space to think, to plan, and to figure out how to rebuild my life from the wreckage Autumn and Nathan had created. The room was small but clean, with a view of the cemetery where our parents were buried and where Grandma Elena's headstone stood next to theirs. Seeing those graves through the window felt like a sign, a reminder that I came from people who'd survived impossible things, who'd built lives from nothing, who'd never given up even when everything seemed lost. I sat on the narrow bed and pulled out my phone, but instead of calling a lawyer or the police like I'd threatened, I called Captain Torres. It was nearly midnight, but military officers understand that emergencies don't follow normal business hours. "Parker?" she answered on the second ring, alert and concerned. "Are you okay? I thought you were supposed to be celebrating your homecoming." "Captain, I need advice, personal advice, not military." "Talk to me." I told her everything. The missing inheritance, Autumn's betrayal, Nathan's affair, the systematic theft that had been going on for months while I was deployed. Captain Torres listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or disbelief, but never trying to interrupt or offer premature solutions. When I finished, there was a long pause. Jesus Christ, Parker, I've seen some shit in my 15 years of service, but this is next-level betrayal. I know. And I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to call the police and have them both arrested. Part of me wants to just disappear and start over somewhere else. Part of me wants to burn that gallery to the ground. Understandable on all counts. But here's what you're going to do instead. You're going to think like a soldier. You're going to assess the situation tactically, identify your objectives, and execute a plan that maximizes your chances of success. What do you mean? I mean, you're not going to react emotionally, even though you have every right to. You're going to be strategic. What are your primary objectives here? I thought for a moment. Get my money back. Make sure they face consequences for what they've done. Rebuild my life. Good. Now what's the most effective way to achieve those objectives? I don't know, I've never been robbed by my own family before. But you have been in combat situations where you had to make tactical decisions under pressure. This is just a different kind of battlefield. She was right. I'd led soldiers through complex operations, coordinated rescues under fire, made life and death decisions with incomplete information. This was just another problem that required strategic thinking and disciplined execution. First thing tomorrow morning, Captain Torres continued, you're going to document everything. Bank statements, investment records, photographs of their expensive renovations, copies of any communications that show premeditation. You're building a case. Then what? Then you're going to consult with a lawyer who specializes in financial fraud and theft. But Parker, and this is important, you're not going to give them a heads up that legal action is coming. The element of surprise is your biggest advantage right now. What do you mean? I mean, they probably think you're going to handle this as a family matter. They're counting on your love for your sister and your relationship with Nathan to prevent you from pursuing serious consequences. They expect you to be hurt and angry, but ultimately forgiving. They're wrong. I know they are. And that's going to be their downfall. While they're hoping you'll cool off and agree to some kind of private resolution, you're going to be building an airtight case against them. After I hung up with Captain Torres, I started documenting everything, just as she'd advised. I screenshotted my bank account balances, downloaded investment statements, saved every email and text message I could find that showed Autumn's lies about her financial situation, or Nathan's deception about his travels to Vermont. Then I started researching lawyers. It was past midnight, but I spent hours reading reviews and checking credentials, looking for someone who specialized in financial crimes and had experience dealing with family theft cases. I found 3 possibilities in Burlington and sent detailed emails to all of them, requesting urgent consultations. But documentation and legal consultation were just the beginning of my plan. As I sat in that hotel room, looking out at my family's graves, I realized that I had advantages Autumn and Nathan didn't know about. Military training, combat experience, and most importantly, underestimation from people who still thought of me as the trusting, loyal sister and girlfriend they'd been manipulating. I called my unit's financial counselor, Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, who specialized in helping soldiers manage their money during and after deployment. She answered despite the late hour, probably recognizing my number and knowing that soldiers sometimes need help with financial emergencies. Santos here. Sergeant Santos, this is Riley Parker. I have a situation that requires immediate financial advice. What's going on, Parker? I explained the theft, the amounts involved, and the urgency of protecting whatever assets might still be recoverable. Sergeant Santos had seen military families destroyed by financial betrayal before, and she immediately understood the tactical approach I needed to take. First priority is preventing further damage, she said. You need to freeze every account they might have access to, change every password they might know, and put fraud alerts on your credit reports immediately. I already changed my banking passwords, but they might have other account information. Then you need to call every financial institution where you have accounts: checking, savings, credit cards, investment accounts, even your TSP and military benefits accounts. Tell them you've been the victim of identity theft and financial fraud. Get everything frozen until you can sort this out legally. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone with banks, credit card companies, and investment firms, placing fraud alerts and security freezes on every account I could think of. Several customer service representatives expressed shock at the amounts involved and the family relationship of the perpetrator, but they all took immediate action to protect my remaining assets. By 4 a.m., I'd successfully locked down every financial account I had, changed every password, and created a paper trail showing that I'd taken immediate action to prevent further theft the moment I discovered what had happened. But I wasn't done. I drove to the 24-hour Walmart in the next town over and bought a small recording device, the kind journalists use for interviews. If Autumn and Nathan wanted to confess to additional crimes or make incriminating statements about their theft, I was going to make sure I had evidence that would hold up in court. Then I drove to Nathan's hotel. He'd mentioned staying at the Hampton Inn near the interstate, probably because he couldn't risk staying at Autumn's apartment where neighbors might see him, and start asking questions about why Autumn's mysterious boyfriend looked exactly like her sister's fiancé. His rental car was in the parking lot, a silver sedan with North Carolina plates that I recognized from his photos. I wrote down the license plate number and took pictures of the car, the hotel, and anything else that might be useful for establishing a timeline of his movements. I wasn't planning to confront him. Not yet. But I wanted him to know that I was taking control of the situation, that I wasn't going to disappear quietly while he and Autumn enjoyed their stolen paradise. I slipped a note under his windshield wiper. I know everything. The 3-year history, the power of attorney fraud, every dollar you stole. Enjoy your last few hours of freedom. Riley. By sunrise, I was back at my hotel room, exhausted but energized by everything I'd accomplished in one night. I'd documented the crime, secured my remaining assets, researched legal options, and put both Nathan and Autumn on notice that I wasn't going to be a victim. My phone had 17 missed calls from Autumn and 12 from Nathan. I deleted all their voicemails without listening to them. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called the first lawyer on my list. Blackstone and Associates. How can I help you? I need to speak with attorney Jennifer Blackstone about prosecuting a case involving theft of nearly $900,000 by family members. She can see you this afternoon at 2 p.m. Will that work? Perfect. I hung up and smiled for the first time since I'd landed at Dover Air Force Base. Autumn and Nathan had made one critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed that my love for them would make me weak, that my family loyalty would prevent me from seeking justice. They were about to learn that 18 months of combat had taught me the difference between loyalty and stupidity, and I was done being stupid. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Blackstone and Associates, watching Autumn sign the final pages of our settlement agreement. Her hands were shaking as she wrote her signature, and she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past half year. The expensive highlights had grown out, the designer clothes had been replaced with discount store basics, and the confidence that had radiated from her during our confrontation in her apartment had completely evaporated. Nathan sat beside her, already having signed his portion of the agreement an hour earlier. He'd been the first to crack under the pressure of criminal charges, agreeing to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd received 18 months in military prison, loss of rank, and a dishonorable discharge that would follow him for the rest of his life. More importantly for me, he'd also agreed to forfeit his military pension and pay restitution. Miss Parker, attorney Jennifer Blackstone said, sliding the completed documents across the table to me, with this settlement, you'll recover $847,000 of your stolen inheritance, plus $127,000 in interest and penalties. Additionally, Ms. Reeves will transfer ownership of the gallery property to you, which has an appraised value of $340,000. I signed my name with steady hands, feeling a satisfaction that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with justice. The investigation had uncovered even more of their crimes than I'd initially suspected: forged documents, tax fraud, and conspiracy charges that could have sent them both to federal prison for decades. The settlement agreement was actually merciful compared to what they could have faced. "What happens to the gallery space?" I asked, though I already knew my answer. "That's entirely up to you," Attorney Blackstone replied. "You own it outright now." Autumn looked up at me for the first time since we'd entered the conference room. "Riley," she said quietly, "are you going to keep the gallery? Everything we built there." "Everything you built with stolen money," I corrected. "And no, I'm not keeping it." The relief that flickered across her face was quickly replaced by confusion when I continued. "I'm donating the entire property to the Millbrook Falls Community Arts Council. They're going to turn it into a community center with free art classes for kids, exhibition space for local artists who actually earn their success, and a scholarship program for young artists who want to attend college." "The Elena Parker Memorial Arts Center," Attorney Blackstone added, reading from her notes, "named after your grandmother." Autumn's face crumpled, and she started crying silently. Not the manipulative tears she'd used during our confrontation, but genuine grief for everything she'd lost through her own choices. "I'm also establishing a foundation for military families," I continued, looking directly at both Autumn and Nathan. "The foundation will provide financial counseling and legal support for service members who've been victims of financial fraud by family members or romantic partners. Apparently, it's more common than anyone wants to admit." Nathan couldn't meet my eyes. "Riley, we never meant—" "I don't care what you meant," I interrupted. "I care what you did. And what you did was teach me that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who'll hurt you worst." But that wasn't the whole truth anymore. In the months since discovering their betrayal, I'd learned something more important than that painful lesson. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, more resilient than I'd known, and capable of building something beautiful from even the most devastating destruction. The criminal investigation had taken 3 months. The civil recovery process had taken another 3. During that time, I'd been living in a small apartment in Burlington, working with a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal, then slowly rebuilding my sense of trust in myself and others. I'd also been building something else, a security consulting business that had grown beyond my wildest original projections. Guardian Point Security Solutions now had 12 employees, contracts with 6 major corporations, and a waiting list of clients who wanted our specialized services. It turned out that a female veteran with combat experience and a personal understanding of betrayal was exactly what many companies needed for their security consulting. The Bronze Star ceremony had finally taken place 2 months after my homecoming, in a small gathering with Captain Torres, my parents' graves as witnesses, and Carmen Rodriguez, who'd driven up from Texas to support me. It wasn't the celebration I'd originally planned, but it was more meaningful than any party could have been. "You've shown more courage in the past 6 months than most people show in a lifetime," Captain Torres had said during the ceremony. "Not just in Afghanistan, but here at home, fighting for justice when it would have been easier to stay quiet." Carmen had been even more direct. "Girl, you took 2 people who tried to destroy you and turned their betrayal into rocket fuel for your own success. That's not just courage. That's genius." The business success was gratifying, but it wasn't the most important thing I'd rebuilt. I'd also rebuilt my ability to trust, carefully and selectively, starting with the therapist who'd helped me process the trauma, then expanding to include business partners, new friends, and eventually, someone special. Dr. Marcus Chen. No, that name was off limits. Dr. James Harrison was a fellow veteran who specialized in treating PTSD and trauma-related depression. We'd met at a veterans support group, bonded over shared experiences with military life and betrayal, and slowly built something genuine based on honesty, mutual respect, and hard-earned wisdom about the difference between love and manipulation. "The thing about betrayal," James had told me during one of our early conversations, "is that it can either make you cynical and closed off, or it can make you incredibly good at recognizing authentic people when you meet them. You've chosen the second path. He was right. After experiencing the worst kind of deception, I developed an almost supernatural ability to spot genuine people. I could sense authenticity in others because I'd been forced to learn the difference between real love and performance, between actual support and manipulation. As I walked out of the law office for the final time, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again: genuine happiness. Not the desperate, fragile hope I'd carried during my deployment, but solid, earned satisfaction built on real accomplishments and authentic relationships. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "How did the final settlement meeting go?" "Better than I hoped," I typed back. "Justice served, money recovered, foundation established, and 2 criminals who will think twice before betraying anyone else's trust." "And how are you feeling about it all?" I paused before answering, looking up at the Vermont mountains that had watched me grow up, lose everything, and rebuild stronger than before. "Free," I finally typed. "I feel free." That evening I drove to the cemetery where my parents and Grandma Elena were buried. I sat beside Elena's headstone and told her about the foundation, about the art center that would bear her name, about the scholarship program that would help other young women chase dreams she'd never had the chance to pursue. "I know you'd be proud of how this turned out," I said aloud, not caring if anyone thought I was crazy for talking to a gravestone. Not because of the money I recovered, but because I turned their betrayal into something meaningful, something that will help other people. I paused, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and orange. Autumn thought she was building something beautiful with stolen money. But you know what's really beautiful? Building something authentic from honest work, real relationships, and the kind of strength that comes from surviving betrayal without letting it make you bitter. As I walked back to my car, I realized that Autumn and Nathan had actually given me an unexpected gift. By destroying the life I'd planned, they'd forced me to discover who I really was, underneath all my careful plans and assumptions about family and love. I was Riley Parker, Bronze Star recipient, successful business owner, trauma survivor, and builder of second chances. I was someone who could be knocked down and get back up stronger. I was someone who could be betrayed by the people closest to her and still choose to trust again, carefully but genuinely. Most importantly, I was someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so successful, so happy, and so completely yourself that the people who tried to destroy you become just a footnote in your much larger story. Autumn and Nathan had tried to write my ending. Instead, they'd given me the perfect beginning. And I was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.